You mentioned obviously the foundation of working with many health professionals really set you up and work with many different athletes. But in your experience on the rehab side of things, what do you think is the best makeup of a successful rehab program? Is it physio-led? Is it EP-led? Or is it S&C-led? And is it experience or education you find tends to be the angle that is best applied?
Yeah, so I wouldn't think it's a particular education-based practitioner. I reckon it's the personality of the person, because your head, whatever you want to call it, your head of rehab, your rehab specialist, pretty much is a high-performance manager trying to manage every different person's information and contribution. You're a key collaborator, because when you're in that role, you'll have a head physio who has experience with a certain injury. You'll have a second string physio. You'll have the head of strength and power. You'll have the head coach who had that injury 25 years ago who rehabbed it in 2 weeks. And you'll have the dietitian, you'll have the psychologist. And so you actually need someone in that role who has the ability to synthesize information and understand what is most important for that athlete at that point in time. And then your exercise prescription and how aggressive or progressive you are with that prescription comes down to actually the environment around the athlete. Because if you don't have the right environment in regards to the athlete having trust in the program, or the athlete understanding that actually getting going 24 hours into an injury isn't going to have a negative impact on them. If you have an environment within your organisation that is a heavy treatment table orientated program, it doesn't matter if you've got an S&C, a physio, a chiro, or an osteo as your head of rehab, because already your environment is going to encourage how that program is going to be run. Whereas if you have an environment that is constantly related to performance, and the key of training is going to make you a better athlete, and training is going to allow you to develop your physical qualities to play more consistent AFL football, then who you have in that all of a sudden the ability for them to synthesize and deliver that information becomes so much easier, because the environment encourages that. And then the environment also encourages a collaborative nature of that key person who's delivering the program, acknowledging, hang on, that head physio actually has treated a lot of these before. So yeah, okay, I'm the one pulling the information together and delivering it, but I need to make sure that we've got the best criterion-based approach, that we're using exercise that they've maybe had success with. Because when it comes to some of these complicated rehab injuries, sometimes there isn't the right criteria for a progression, and so sometimes you're developing things that you believe are important based on previous experiences and previous athletes, and there won't be a research paper to support what you're doing. And so you're pulling evidence-informed information or experience-based information to develop the most robust program possible.
What do you reckon people can probably learn from an accelerated hamstring approach rather than a rest, pain-free, low modality work before the performance side?
I reckon one aspect is imaging, and how much an organisation or athletes believe that imaging is important for determining what their injury is. And so coming from the Brisbane model, where our head of medical, Peter Blanche, was there is value for imaging, but treat the man, not the scan, and making sure that what an athlete is capable of doing and what their function is dictates what you do with them and when you do it. And so with any accelerated soft tissue principle, it's about finding what the athlete can do and trying to encourage that as early as possible. And so sometimes you can get caught in the aspect of an injury happened on a Friday. We got the weekend off, or the rest of the group has a weekend off, so we'll just give them 2 days off and we'll get started on Monday. My philosophy is, all right, well, if a grand final was in 10 days, would we be giving them the weekend off? No. Well, then let's give them the most opportunity to recover and return to peak performance as quickly as possible. Now, that's not going to say that they're going to play in 10 days, but our role is to give them every opportunity to perform to their peak level as quickly as possible. And so the keys with that that I find that's maybe different in some areas is people just aren't sure what you can achieve and how early you can achieve it, so they just don't try. And a lot of that can be predominantly associated with eccentrics in reality, because that's the thing that a lot of people tend to want to avoid or running, because the athlete. Now, if your athlete can't walk pain-free, then yes, they probably haven't earned the right to run. But running, there are so many different aspects to running. A lot of the time we just think that running is your linear-based running, where in reality you have running mechanics or running drilling, or you have lateral-based movement. And so the lateral-based movement is probably the one that I don't see done at as many organisations and within as many kind of soft tissue reconditioning frameworks. And basically all that involves is side skipping, karaoke, in and outs. And so it's pretty much you could do some agility ladder work, but without the agility ladder there. And all you're encouraging is tissue contraction relaxation, and you're actually providing a really good stimulus for other tissue to continue to adapt while respecting the injury. And so that's probably one element of the accelerated model that I don't see as much. But then it's also the use of possibly wall-based drills, standing-based drills, dribbles, low-dose plyos or low-amplitude plyos that can all be done that encourage a really good neuromuscular benefit. And sometimes the thing that I find with these sorts of injuries, and especially hamstring injuries, is that once you start to do some of these movements, you basically start to get a desensitization to the pain, and you probably start to, whether it's the athlete is improving the neuromuscular contraction aspect or the intracellular messaging aspect, or whether it's actually just a decrease in pain sensitization. But as you progress them through the gym-based and the field-based work, they start to have less awareness during their movement drilling, and they have less awareness during some of the running drilling. And all of a sudden, you tend to have the athlete turn around to you and go, I think I could try to jog if you want me to. And my big thing with any of this sort of planning is the way you plan your session is plan for what you know the athlete will succeed with. If your athlete did their hamstring while they were accelerating at speed, accepting a ground ball, probably don't do ground balls in your first session, but look for a way to integrate that movement early on. So if that is doing some form of sumo squat in your warm-up, if that is doing a ground ball pickup without the ball where you're just introducing that movement, then get it in there as soon as possible. Because one thing that we know with kind of the brain-body connection is our body will find a way to find a solution to how you want to move. And that may be a solution that has a little bit of awareness, and I'm fine. Some of Jack Hickey's work around pain under 3 or 4 out of 10, that's fine. Obviously we're talking about soft tissue related injury here, and it changes for bone and tendon, but those are the key aspects that I find build success in early on. And the other aspect is going on consecutive days. I think sometimes in team sports, once again, in your environment, some athletes may be so used to day on, day off, they never think they can do 2 days in a row, and it's kind of, nah, if I do that, I'm going to get a bone stress. But for a lot of these acute rehabs, I'll do 4 days in a row, because you might only be accumulating 1 or 2K each day, and depending on whether they're able to run or not, then you might add some conditioning. But even then, you're conditioning in your first 4 days. You're not actually developing physiological conditioning. You're just maintaining tissue adaptation and tissue resilience for pretty much all the other tissue around where you've injured. So those are probably the key aspects of that accelerated approach. Definitely play around with blood flow restriction, depending on the athlete and their pain perception at the time, and have used that in their warm-ups to once again improve intramuscular cellaring, decrease any neuromuscular inhibition, and what I have found is it tends to improve their function with some of that running mechanics or running drilling, and also helps to improve some of that isolated strength work you may be doing in early on hamstring rehab, like double leg bridges, single leg bridges, or 2 up, 1 downs, and you can tend to get that involved. But the other aspect of probably the osteopathic side that comes in is I'm not afraid to get my hands on the athlete. So if they can't do a Nordic or a slide out, or like manual resisted eccentric training and manual resisted isos is as good as anything out there. And so find the position that they are comfortable in and then train them within that. And what you'll find is that throughout the coming days or even coming hours, that range will improve, and then all of a sudden you adapt the exercise from day 1 to day 2. By day 4, they're doing Nordics, they're running linearly based conditioning, and all of a sudden that's where you've been able to shorten the amount of time that allows them to get back to performance.
We're sort of the opposite in our career, but very similar in our family at the moment. You've got 2 daughters. I'm about to have a second daughter. I've stepped out of pro sport and are very thankful the amount of lack of sleep that's currently occurring and balancing things. It's fantastic not to be answering to a head coach. You've already got 2 girls, and you've stepped into the top position where arguably you are on speed dial from the coach, and you cop very, very large phone calls day in, day out. How are you balancing currently? I know it's only been 2 to 3 weeks of this position, but moving forward, how do you look at your family and go, well, how do I balance being in sport and having a young family? Because there's a lot of coaches, a lot of physios out there that do go through this, and a lot of people do struggle with it. Is it something that you put much thought into moving forward, or is it something that you just sort of adapt to as you go, and they understand that they're going to miss you for a little bit, and then you try and find times where you can spend more with them, or you haven't even thought about it? I'd love to get your thought on it moving forward before we end up the conversation.
It's probably something it was probably the first thing I thought of, really, in regards to the role. And, I want to succeed in this role, and I want our organisation to succeed. And so the easy option is to throw myself in 110% and try to be perceived as the hardest working HPM in the league, but that's not going to breed success for me, and it's not also going to breed success for my department. The key is that I want to be a leader within our performance and medical department to make sure that the other staff understand that going home at a reasonable time and working smarter, not harder, is important for our organisation. Because if I do not hold myself account, then the perception is within the staff that I'm managing is that they need to be the earliest there and the last one home. Unfortunately, there's probably not ever going to be a true balance, and that's something for me to wrap my head around. Is there are going to be times that I'm going to need to be fully invested in work. But then there are other times that I need to be fully invested in my family. And so for me, I'm probably really lucky in my partner Therese and her understanding of what working in high performance sport is like. But for a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old, they don't understand that. So when I'm home, it's about being present and making sure that if a text message does come through or a phone call does come through, it's relatable on importance. If an athlete's texting me and asking, can you change my team builder? That's probably not the most important thing for me to respond to at that time. And it's really the easy thing is to increase the amount of availability and always be responding to text messages within a couple of minutes at most. The hard thing is to actually just park that, be present, and then find the time to respond to that or to return that phone call. I haven't found the balance just yet, but having some self-awareness around knowing when I need to have balance is probably what I'll start to really discover. And in the off season, it's probably a little bit easier because I'm not having to go into work every day, and so there isn't that need to always be face to face with the athletes and face to face with the coaches. But that'll obviously change once we get closer to pre-season.